Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special budget meeting of the Town of Richmond Select Board. Before I begin, I just want to mention our colleague Adam Wood is not with us tonight as we're looking out at black skies and dealing with freezing temperatures. Poor Adam is yachting in the Atlantic in a boat, so our thoughts are with Adam. Any public comment before we begin? Quiet crowd tonight. Okay.
Hope Adam's not near that floating island of garbage.
Oh, God, no.
Wherever it is.
Okay. Josh, board, any additions or deletions to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, moving on. Going into the warrant agenda. First, we have review of the fourth quarter fiscal year 24 financials. And we have Connie Bono with us, our town finance director. Take it away, Connie.
It's the one thing I didn't put on my flash drive.
No, yeah, I've got it if you want to look at anything, but thanks for bearing with us as it takes a little bit of time to close out the fiscal year. We want to make sure we have adjusting entries. So typically we try to do these a week or so after the quarter closes, but at the end of the fiscal year takes a little bit more time. So everything's included in the packet, which is online as well. I think sort of some of the sort of bigger notes is that, police continues to have vacancy savings as we had predicted. And then expenses and some of the FEMA reimbursements, the 2023 flood are included in the budget status report. So that does include in there, and they're included in the unassigned reserve fund as well as we get. So I don't know if it's worth pulling it up and going through it in great detail, unless there's any questions from anybody that you had when you were reviewing it.
There wasn't anything unexpected throughout the year. Well, other than the flood last July.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Should we maybe pick out the over-unders, like anything that sort of,
There really, other than police, there really wasn't, in the budget itself,
Yeah,
there
that's
wasn't
true.
anything that was out of line.
Yeah, police was really the biggest one.
Highway came in under, but
Yeah.
because of the flood,
I guess we could, you want to pop up these, we can sort of maybe look at the bottom lines. That might be helpful.
Before we do a deep dive on that, I apologize. Can I just back up for a second and suggest that we add item E, review of Saturday's town meeting and discussion on going forward?
good idea, thank you. Need a motion for that?
I have no objection.
No objection.
Okay. Now we can do.
No action will be taken on it. So
Right.
Okay. All right, so we'll start with. Get these together here.
it's always good when you see fewer delinquencies.
Fewer delinquent taxes, reduce that. So I think the big story in revenue is net interest. We had budgeted 14,000, we made 203,000, so quite a bit higher.
Well, part of that's because of favorable rates. Part of it is because we put more money into CDs.
Both.
correct.
Exactly. We've had more money to invest. So where's the, so that's sort of the big story in revenue, I think. Planning and zoning revenue, that's planning and zoning revenue.
That's police.
Oh, yes, the heading is wrong.
You're hiding on your
Oh, no,
blankie.
It's so cold to do.
Zoning total.
It's your choice to close that door. That keeps the heat out.
I got it, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's
Yeah, that's
So-
why I really want to completely revamp our chart of accounts, because when this was initially put together, they didn't give much forethought to the account numbers that we use.
And there's not really a total of police revenue. It's kind of odd the way this is put together, really, when you look at it.
Yeah, if anybody could generate revenue, it'd be them.
We keep kidding. Oh, no, Jim's on one of them. The overall revenue was up over budget, at a budget of about 2.7, came in at about 2.9. And a lot of that's probably due to the interest.
So just to be clear,
Yeah.
that wasn't tax revenue that we
No.
collected.
So that tax revenue actually comes in at the 2.4. Once it's billed, it hits the budget as actual. So that doesn't account for any delinquencies on current year taxes.
So delinquent principal comes in the next budget, or
Yeah, it comes in a separate, yeah, it could be, so
since you don't know where.
Yeah,
it's
there's
at.
carryover and I'm sure we had delinquent from the last quarter that came
Mhm.
in this quarter.
Mhm.
yeah, and that's mostly what
Or
this
next
is
quarter.
here.
Mm.
It's 3,800. Delinquent tax interest, delinquent tax penalty.
Yeah.
Okay,
And we use that to offset the expense line on the other side, because that's Lori is only paid through tax penalties.
Yeah.
She doesn't collect, she doesn't get paid.
That's an incentive.
so looking at admin, we were close to on budget, a little over 449 to 429. Looks like salaries went over a bit. I think we had a larger increase than we had budgeted for probably on that. Other than that, really close. Insurance a little bit higher for health insurance.
And it's impressive we were able to buy a whole taco truck for $2,400.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that revenue from the
Yeah,
taco truck to start kicking in. In all seriousness, that's the employee recognition party
Yeah.
across the last October. And we did just announce another party for next Wednesday. I think I emailed everybody.
Yeah, over at Stone
We'll
Corral.
go to Stone Corral for this one. It's a little later in the year. And we'll be inside. It'll be a little easier, I think.
Taco truck's getting its snow tires put on there.
Probably, yeah. Okay, so that's. Oh, that's just payroll and benefits, right? Is there a total line here? Town office expense. Building and grounds. So total administration, about 5% over budget.
Barn?
I'm just gonna point to the alarm system. It's somewhat striking to me that we have not had an alarm system heretofore.
Yeah, that was, I think, the smoke alarm system that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of amazing. We didn't have that, so with the fire department in attendance, I'm sure they're happy that we actually now have a system. but- And sometimes when it goes off, most times when it goes off, there's not even a real fire, but you guys come anyway, so we like seeing you more often. Yeah, and I guess lately it's actually operated pretty well. When it first came in, there were some bugs where it kept going off.
I heard you were burning toast
No, we don't even have a toaster.
anymore.
Yeah, well, there you go. Let's see, listers are a little high, tax map maintenance seems higher there. But again, relatively small, maybe at $30,000.
I think when I looked at the prior year, we didn't get them in the prior year, so.
Planning and zoning was under, where were we under there?
I'm looking for better if you turn them on. Power bar.
Looks like, yeah, transportation planning, we had budgeted $20,000, only spent 5,400. That's sort of the big savings in planning and zoning. I think that's just a lack of BWP projects. So it does seem oddly under. Police, this is where we had our largest savings. Where are we at? There we go. So our budget is 710, we spent 490. That's even with contracting with Heinsberg, just definitely good amount of vacancy savings and the operational savings in police. And that was part of what we were able to forecast and put into the FY25 offset for taxes.
It will help if I can put my glasses on. We've got vehicle expenses and we've got cruiser, community outreach. Why is community outreach under vehicle expenses?
Kind of, that probably goes back to, it's probably not there in the budget, but the way Nemrick.
This is just the way our
Just
charter.
the way the Nemrick pulls it out. Yeah, when we organize it in the budget for review, it's not mixed in with that.
Okay.
So I think it has to do with the numbering sequence here, it looks like.
Yeah, all the NEMRIC reports go in numerical order.
And
Darn their hides.
we try to put them into a little bit more
We put them in sensible
logical
order.
order. Yeah.
No one puts baby in the corner.
All right, where's library's bottom line?
Mhm.
Library, again, we're a little over, about 6% over budget, probably. In salaries.
And they moved a couple of positions to 24-hour positions,
In
so they could go
24
on
they
their
did?
retirement.
In 24 they did,
Oh.
without it being budgeted.
I apologize, I should know the answer to this, but do we have a depreciation schedule for the computers where we're scheduled to replace? Each computer,
Depreciation schedule or replacement plan?
a replacement.
Yeah.
schedule.
For the library, I don't know.
No, for the computers, period, across the town.
Yeah, I've had various iterations of that with Simple Root and others. I don't know that it's been reviewed super lately, unfortunately. I do, yeah, I've got about 3 different versions of it, Jay. I keep like starting it, trying to review with Simple Root. It could use some work.
Okay.
Do we have, that suggests then we have an inventory?
It's in Josh's office.
The dead ones.
No, we do have an inventory. We have all of our computers actually listed with Simple Root, because when they come in, they first go through everything, ID all the computers and make sure everyone that they're supporting at least, which is every computer we have.
I didn't know if Simple Root by any chance had a purchasing deal with a vendor or,
They usually do. When we do need a computer, we go through them.
okay. For some strange reason, I still have access to buying Hewlett Packard computers via their employee purchase plan. So if you're ever really, really bored, we can compare what the rates are, but
Fire department had more calls than usual, so they're over in salaries.
just hang up the phone, guys.
What was the nature of the extra calls?
A lot of the highway or
Car accidents and.
a couple of weeks back, on a Saturday, I think it was, there was a big thing on the highway about 5 o'clock. I want to say on a Friday or Saturday. Do you remember there was like 6 different fire trucks and all the police in the world out there near the monitor barn? Does that ring a bell?
It was a rear end accident, yeah,
Oh, for the construction.
Okay,
somebody slowed down with a different line.
Or as they approach the bridge.
It was more towards Pratt's.
yeah.
Where it goes down to one lane. People, da.
It looked like either there was a bunch of cars involved or a lot of people were bored, but
I slowed down way before it because I've almost gotten there and
Overall fire, pretty much right on budget. 225 to 226. Now we're in recreation.
Valerie's recreation, now that's just for soccer, right?
No, that's. Karen?
Yeah.
For cleaning, for concession stand cleaning.
Oh, concession things.
Well, not concession stands, right?
Restrooms, porta potties.
We don't, the soccer doesn't show on this, because soccer is a special project reserve fund, or a special reserve fund. So, and we don't pay, those are all volunteers, so that we pay for like.
I didn't know if
soccer
you were paying referees or,
No, if they are, they're not paying through
Okay.
us. I mean, they're probably all volunteer, like little.
Not at the rec level.
okay.
So yeah.
I know some places has had to start paying them because the adults are so abusive toward the ref, that to get
Yeah.
people to ref, they have to pay them.
Little League is definitely having that same conversation. And people just. Yeah, even if people aren't abusive, people just don't want to umpire or referee.
Mhm.
It's a sort of a thankless job, but
kind of takes the fun out of it.
yeah, the abusiveness is no good. There's one town that if you argue or say something to a referee, you're not allowed to come back to a Little League game until you umpire 3 Little League games or yourself. And then you're allowed to come back to your kids' games. Yeah, so, which I think
I
is
don't know the
You're
rules.
just frustrated.
completely
Oh,
June.
go ahead, June.
No, she's muted.
Sorry. Could you talk about the line item on maintenance that's almost 400% over? Is that what you were talking about just now?
We weren't, so I think, is that the cleaning and repair?
Well, it doesn't line up with that, so that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so I think that was hard. We didn't put that.
That's-
down.
yeah,
It should be down a slight bit, but I think that was for cleaning up after the floods. It then gets
Okay.
offset.
Yeah, I thought that's what we were talking about, but it didn't line up. So I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
So that was covered by insurance.
Oh,
I
okay.
thought we had to meet that.
No, I think the part of the maintenance was covered and then part of it went to FEMA.
Oh,
So.
Okay,
Both those lines, it would have impacted the trash
Oh, it was
removal and
the
the
trash
maintenance.
removal, okay. Really, trash removal? I know we had dumpsters that were covered by
Covered by
FEMA, but they
insurance.
wouldn't have been put on here. Not sure if that 2,200 in trash removal was covered. That's not too much over the normal amount.
Anything in the budget would have been an offset with insurance revenue coming in. It'd be over in Fund 42 if it was a FEMA.
Oh, so this is, okay, I see. So there was,
this report would be much easier to read if it was in a reasonable order. Because we got total recreation, but there's no recreation items right there about it. But the reason for the overage is the repairs. The damage.
so yeah, that's sort of the, again,
If
this
we got
story down
the-
here.
If we put the concession stand in pontoons, we could just.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things
No,
that
that,
the,
actually, it's not a bad idea.
I mean, that's one of the
Yeah,
things that the park committee is
anchor it,
looking
maybe
at
put
is
it-
moving it out of there, maybe putting something up at the top of the plateau. Or we just use porta potties and you can pull them out when a flood comes. And the concession stand, I was talking to Virginia about it, as they were looking at the flood regulations. If that whole building went away and we had like a trailer that could come in and people could, literally could sell concessions out of, or soccer could sell concessions out of, or even just have a food truck that shows up.
Yeah,
It's a.
and
it's
we could
another
use
way
the
to do it.
the square footage of the concession stand
Yeah,
for structures elsewhere in the park. Because it's,
Oh.
yeah, I don't know if you're allowed to swap like that.
I-
Let's not get into zoning right now.
okay,
That is a zoning conversation, and that is clearly one opinion,
okay.
which I personally support. There's precedent for that in other venues, but
Mhm.
it's sort of a sticky wicket at the moment.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I ask, related to that, do we have any idea about the frequency with which the concession stand is actually used in the course of a year?
It is sporadic. It's really I've only ever seen it used by Little League. In my last, I think it's 3 or 4 years now of running Little League, we ran it consistently 1 year when we had good volunteers. Other than that, it's like really depending on what volunteers you get.
So I was looking for a number.
A number of days it's
6.5.
open.
A number per year, like once, 5 times?
Oh, so
10 times?
one year it was used like consistently for about 2 months. Outside of that, the last 3 years, it really hasn't been used too much at all for actual concessions.
So from maybe 50 to close to 0?
No days?
Yeah.
Sure, that's probably,
The idea of paying a food
No,
truck
okay.
and sparing ourselves the repair expense after all the.
or don't
floods.
even pay a food truck, just charge them to come and say,
Well,
oh, you
no,
want
okay,
to
you're right.
League, you
But-
show up.
By having that thing there, we're just basically guaranteeing that every so often we're gonna have to pay thousands to.
Yeah.
And mostly that building is
Same
used for
thing.
the restrooms. I mean, half of it's the restrooms,
Right.
so.
So that's the thing I want to call out for this. And it's sort of a parking lot for this. We clearly need restrooms, bathrooms down there.
Yeah.
Toilet facilities. It's my thesis that if people are cooking hot dogs, I can't tell you how many times you see people tailgating and they bring their stuff with them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's not that difficult, especially with, you can buy a portable grill now that's like
Mhm.
fits in the back of your car, not in your pickup truck.
Mhm.
So I'm just calling the question of the return on investment for both the current concession stand and a future concession stand, given the competing interest for other infrastructure in the park.
Yeah, and this is the time to put that in motion too.
June, go ahead.
Thank you. This might be 2 steps back, but when it was mentioned that there are some lines that are reimbursable by FEMA because of the flood damage, how do you record that? So when you're looking at next year's budget, you don't budget for something that is a reimbursable expense.
So I think the only thing on here, Connie, you said was insurance. I think I misspoke with FEMA.
Anything in the budget status report would be expense to a budget line reimbursed by our insurance. Anything
it's-
FEMA related is expensed and the revenue coming in lives over in Fund 42,
which is,
because that is not part of our budget.
and that's
Okay.
not, so I think a very small amount is the insurance. Most of it is
Correct.
not even on here because it's all being reimbursed by FEMA.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure, that it's not showing up here. If it's being reimbursed, it's somewhere else.
Right. Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, where are we going next? And this is.
Now, right there, so there's, if you look at that, under capital vehicles, debt, why it's there, I have no idea. But you'll notice there's a budget of 0 and an actual of 93,000. That is because at the end of the fiscal year, the auditors require that we move it out of Fund 42 and over there. But that's totally an end of the year adjustment.
Bart?
So this is directly answers or related to June's question, is it not, that during the course of the year, you don't really see it, but at the end of the year, it's sort of close out?
Right, and
You
even
see
after
it?
the auditors are here, I'll sit down and talk with them and say, what do you want the plan to be this year? And they'll say, move it on over.
June, go ahead.
Thank you. So why there? Why is it moved into capital vehicle debt?
It shouldn't be under capital vehicle debt. That, again, that goes back to a very poorly planned chart of accounts.
If it was, yeah, it's just because this is sorted by account number.
Yep.
The
No,
account
I
number-
know, but when you build a chart of accounts, you put it where it belongs. So can it be moved to where it belongs?
No,
You can't assign
need
a
the
different
history.
number?
what we can do, what I would love to have the time to do before I retire would be you work with Nemrick and you completely redo your chart of accounts. And they are able to manipulate things in a way that both sets of numbers exist. But unless
Right.
you're doing a whole switch like that, you would lose all your history.
So, David, I'm confused about the taxonomy in this system, because that's essentially what these codes are. It's a taxonomy with categories and then subcategories down to the individual level.
Right.
How is it that they would, it's just random assignment? This doesn't make sense to me as a
It should
taxonomy.
not be random.
I could not tell you what their thinking was way back when they first implemented Nemrick. It also could have been at request of how the auditors wanted something to look.
Because Connie, you basically inherited like 95% of the
Right.
numbers, and then we
I'm inheriting it.
try to add things in, like as we add budget lines, you try to create a line that makes numerical sense to put it into the right spot, but things that were the way they were for 15 years
Yep.
can't unfortunately change, is my understanding.
It's like Sullivan and Powers wanted me to use 10790 for things like that. I wouldn't. I would make that, what fund did it apply to? What department did it apply to? But they wanted it at 10790, so when the report prints numerically, it lands in a strange place.
Yeah, this doesn't make sense, because when you're looking at, most people will look by section and then you'll say, oh, you've got 293 and these 4 categories that are 10790 are not even related to each other.
Right.
Nope.
Right. It's as laid out, it's extremely confusing.
It is the most confusing chart of accounts I've ever seen.
I would agree. I only
used.
know it because I've been looking at it for 13 years.
Yeah, and it can be redone, but there's a mapping process that happens so that from
right.
year to year, the auditors know what changes.
Right.
Appropriations pretty much even, with the exception of, it looks like a little less spending expenditures and flags, and I think flags have been moved out of appropriations. That's another weird one that shouldn't really be in appropriations. I think we've moved that out in this year's budget.
Yeah.
And that's that for that. We can go to highway. Which again, I think on highway. what
Can
we
I
were
ask a
under-
question before you move on?
Yes, go
Sure.
ahead.
This is the reason I wanted to come, based on appropriations and the
Mhm.
conversation that happened at the town meeting. I would like to ask the select board to consider really evaluating those and finding out how much work each of them does in Richmond, because our community cares camp is at risk of closing because of funding. And I would like to see the town consider like that being a major priority, because that directly serves the kids in our town and surrounding towns. And so I just wanted to put that out there because I fear I'm going to go to the meeting that's happening soon, maybe tomorrow night, regarding this, but they're at risk of closing.
Bart? So this is sort of an interesting question, and Jeff and I dove into this, and it's had our fingerprints on why this split out in different ways. At one point, a bunch of things were lumped together, and including Kusi, and our conversation was moving Kusi from a charitable appropriation to the police department budget. So there are some things here that are still, perhaps misplaced. MMCTV, which provides a service, and we had sort of split out service
Could you go back to that page?
from charitable, Lake Iroquois, and I think this was after your time on the select board, June, that we adopted at one point the United Way funding
Yeah.
request for many of the elements of it.
Yeah.
So as I think Mary Houle stated at that meeting, the form is intended for people to give us this information, and some of them are much better than others. And the number of people served, like I don't think Richmond Farmers Market can give us the number of people served or the number of people in Richmond.
Right.
And some can, if I recall correctly, UVM Home Health and Hospice and AgeWell both did. They gave us specific numbers of people in Richmond who were served. And as you may know, some of those services, like from Home Health and Hospice, are pretty costly at a per visit level.
And it's charged to insurance.
Right.
Well, actually, if you look at the UVM Home Health and Hospice, their own books, they do Medicare, Medicaid, private and long-term care insurance, but they typically run a loss on Medicaid because of reimbursement rates. And they also take people regardless of insurance coverage. So the nuances of each one of these agencies is really different.
Yeah,
Richmond
every
Rescue
medical
is-
provider loses money on Medicaid and Medicare.
Richmond Rescue is really good at giving us data. I think one of the histories of our community cares camp was what's the proportional funding from the different towns based on participation. And I don't know where that sits today.
Right.
But in terms of them about to be going out of business, there is latitude about what they ask for. So I don't think we've seen the forms for this year.
Yeah.
double.
At the last meeting.
This year's is doubled from,
I haven't seen them.
sorry, fiscal year
Oh, you-
26.
Yeah.
Fiscal year 26 request is doubled from
Right.
fiscal year.
But June's point and Bart's point is a good one. Turning Point Center, I don't believe has put in a request for this year, but I'm fairly familiar with them, and they do not do any programs in Richmond. You have to go to Burlington to use their services. And so I would not, since I don't think they've asked, it's kind of a moot point, but, and I'd also be interested in knowing how much, like the Lunch Center actually does. I am pretty sure that, STEPS and HopeWorks can give you good numbers. I think I've seen them in their annual report in previous years, but yeah, I think less is more. I think we should focus more on the ones that are really integral to Richmond citizens and not the ones that we just think are nice. And I definitely don't think we should, if there's any means by which we can keep our community cares camp from going under, we should do it, because that's the only hot meal that some kids
Yeah.
get.
Thank you.
All the appropriations are there for the budget meeting that we posted in October. So all the requests are in there.
So David, to June's point, though, at a certain point, these dollar figures, the requests come in and they go on to an Australian paper ballot and people vote them up or down. They're I'll just be clear, after Saturday's meeting, there's no opportunity, as there has been in the past at town meeting, to modify the figures after they're in.
Mhm.
And OCC is an example of that.
Mhm.
Could you decide that you're going to support nonprofits? Your charitable donations are gonna say be limited to $100,000. Vote for your top 5 and then kind of whittle down. Like, I think people are gonna vote for rescue, although you might not want to have that in there because is it a donation or is it?
It's a service.
So, I mean, maybe we
It's a
should look
service.
at, we've restructured this quite a bit from this. So if we look at,
Do we want to wait till we get to the
well,
budget?
I mean, we
I think that,
could,
We're in fourth quarter financials right now, so.
right,
I mean,
So I think it's a good point, David. I think Connie's point, and why don't we put this in the parking lot from when we get there?
Yeah.
Many towns do different approaches to these things. They will sometimes give a separate committee a budget. I think Shelburne or Charlotte gives them $40,000 and says distribute it as you see fit. With some guidelines. So there are a variety of approaches. I am personally more sensitive to the idea that just because you're based in Richmond, you serve Richmond residents, and the fact that you aren't based in Richmond means you don't. I think it's more subtle than that.
Yeah.
I will also say we have here Regional Planning Commission and GBIC. I actually asked Regional Planning Commission, which I think is now not under a charitable appropriation, for an analysis of the dollars that have gone out in the last 3 to 5 years by town and then per capita. Now, to be fair, they count both state and local projects. The highest per capita expenditures in the CCRPC tip list is Richmond. And of course, that's heavily influenced by the Route 2 project and bridge project, but that's, you know, if you're going to count it that way, you'd say they spent a lot of money in Richmond.
June, you said there's an OCC meeting this week.
Let me just look at my calendar. I'm planning on going. It's a
I'm
Wednesday
searching
night.
for-
It was on Front Porch Forum and I don't
Oh, okay.
on my
I'll search
calendar
for it
right
there.
now, but I'll look it up and let you know.
Okay, thanks. Because that's about the last nonprofit I want to see failing.
Funded.
Right.
So I'll just, as a sort of process observation, it's typically the organizations themselves that come to us to request money. So that would be my general view. If OCCC says they have a financial crisis that they didn't foresee, I would generally expect them to come to us. Sort of.
Well, I think talking to Suzanne, I think the fact that they had to come to us for $20,000 within the last decade has them a little gun shy about doing it again, but I think they should do it again. They at least ask.
They could, and it's up to the voters.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, so OCC. Yeah, they requested 6,000 this year and they had 3,000 last year, so Lake County said it doubled.
I asked Suzanne once what it costs to sponsor a kid, and I was surprised by how much it costs. It's like well over $1,000 for a kid.
Wow, okay.
For it's what, 6 weeks long?
Something like that. But yeah, there's a lot of expenses that go into it that people, it's not just paying for construction paper and scissors.
Right.
And that's part of the point of the form is they
Right.
give us their total budget and number served. If they fill it out correctly, the form, which full disclosure, I was not here and did not see. But the point of it was so that you could get some judgment about what they're spending for money, what percent of people come from Richmond and what percent of money comes from the town versus other sources.
And on the highway.
I guess.
Order. So here again, Connie, you could probably explain this better than I, but we see the 392 from the 2023 storm. So that was all in Fund 42. And then they had to switch it into highway for the full amount expended.
So, and part of why they do that, when you look at the audit report, we have the page that we look at for the unassigned funds. one column's for general, one column's for highway. So part of why the auditors move it over to Fund 11 for highway is so that we can take a look at what are the unassigned funds for highway.
Right, because that money would come away from unassigned funds because we
Correct.
spent it. Okay. So looking at that, where are we at here? That's about where budget overage is, right? We're at 1.8, went up to about 2 million. So that's mostly there. Otherwise, we were sort of down in some areas, it looks like.
Yep. Yeah, if it wasn't for the flood, they would have been under budget.
Yeah, and unfortunately for the flood, they might have completed other projects too, potentially, so. I think what staffing was. Well, they were pretty even on staffing too, so. Overtime, of course, was over because of flood and winter, but yeah. Any questions on Q4 highway, or should we move on to Q1 25?
Guess we should move on to Q1 25.
Okay. So in this one, we do not yet have the flood expenses from the 24 flood added in. They're still living in Fund 42. We can cruise through here and Q1 budget status general.
Hey, while you're looking, David, maybe for June's benefit as well as others, when I go onto the town website, there is still the discretionary funding policy of 2014 posted that talks about discretionary funding.
I don't think has it been updated?
I think so, but I don't see that, and I see the 2014. So where I'm going is either this is the current one and we should pay attention to it, or it is not the current one and
we
we
should
need
do
to
it.
have that one posted and pay attention to that one.
Alright.
And so my real point is that that policy is what we're supposed to follow, as opposed to in a given moment in a, say, oh, let's do this year. We, in my opinion, we should change the policy to change an approach. Rather than the other way
I
around.
think we did, but it looks like it wasn't updated on the website.
Yeah, so that's why I'm looking for it to refer to the most recent,
that's-
so.
Okay. So that's this one here.
So this might be another parking lot until we get to it, because we're on to something else, but
Alright, so. Yeah, I'd have to look at it, but in skimming it, it looks like a lot of the same questions that we're currently asking.
I think the form is the same. It's what comes before the form.
Okay. Alright. Alright, so Q1. This is general fund. Connie, do you have any thing to call out?
Not really.
A lot of, some of this is timing that we're not gonna receive this
Exactly,
revenue till
yeah.
later. Where's our interest? Interest, we're trending ahead, but that might slow down because we have some CDs that are coming due here in November that we're not gonna renew because we need the cash flow. So
Mhm.
we'll start to slow down on the interest as we've spent more on the flood. I have less to reinvest.
It was good while it lasted.
Sure was. Town admin, we're at about in payroll. Let's see what's going to the bottom line. It always makes me stop too soon. Ready? Okay. So it looks like we're at about 20% of town administration. I think there's some timing things in there though. Like fire protection, we haven't paid yet. So some one-time bills that we don't pay until a little bit later. probably keeping us down a little bit. Interesting, we haven't had any Lister bills in quarter 1. But we'll catch up with that. Nemrick not billing us.
Well, and it may have been in October. Remember, this just goes through September. But yeah, we're behind on police contracts and Nemrick
I
contracts.
knew we were behind in police contracts.
Yep.
That is a typical lag. Planning and zoning, right about even for 25%. Police, continued vacancy savings, and as Connie mentioned, we're behind on getting billed. I think they billed us what, for 1 month, maybe?
I think all we have is July to date.
So 1 month.
Hi, this is Chris, and that's the billing from Heinsberg?
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that it isn't, oh, there we go, make it a little bit better. That's a 8% of budget on police, but that will go up because where's our billing for Heinsberg? Well, we've only got about,
Yeah, everything involving the police could change drastically multiple times during the year.
has potential.
Mhm.
All right. Library. Right about 25%, 23.31, so seems like things are, big round numbers, bottom line, kind of on target there.
And as far as library goes, expenses on things like fixing the elevator yet again, that won't show up here because it comes under town center.
Yeah, that's gonna be under the
Correct.
town center fund, the elevator bill.
Yeah, that's yet another reason to organize the chart of accounts in a different way.
Right, well, that would be in a totally different fund. This is only showing.
Okay, sure. But in
Right.
terms of presenting the information to say, really, that's,
We have to look at the reserve funds that
Right.
in more depth know what are the ins and outs there.
right.
Fire department, again, looks like they're up in salaries. They continue to have, more, seems like
That's a function of more calls.
more calls.
Yeah.
Every month there's more calls.
Over 200 right?
Yeah,
For the calendar year 2024.
and last year you had what, 180 or
Oh, we're not even
about
done.
200?
About 110, I mean, 210.
210, okay.
Over,
So we're-
another month and a half to go.
We're a little about even with last year with 6 weeks to go. Yeah, all right. So fire, OCC will be meeting on Wednesday, November 18th. There you go. So next week,
Okay, thanks, June.
Wednesday, November 18th. That's the 20th, next Wednesday. Next Wednesday is the 20th.
Oh. It says meeting on, November 18th, so that is
You may be looking at a prior year possibly.
So that's Monday.
Monday, yeah. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Sorry, anyway. So fire is a little bit over.
That's opposite our
pace.
meeting then.
What's that? Yeah, you can't go. It's opposite our meeting. We have a budget or a regular session
Then,
next week.
darn it.
The brush truck repair, is that reimbursable?
By insurance.
By insurance. That's why that's in here. Yeah, and not in Fund 42.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that,
And for those
have we
people
been
watching
paid
at
for
home,
that yet? I'm not sure if we have.
I think we may have been. You'd have to go look at 10,640.
but for people watching at home who don't know what repairs are being involved, can you just give a little background about what happened to the brush truck?
We have the fire experts here.
Right now, it's
In the
all
flood.
operating, using it.
Well, what happened to it?
Why did it get
Oh,
broken?
what happened to it? I wasn't here.
Jerry can tell us.
We had a call, that West White Hill was washing out. A gentleman called my house personally. On the way to the fire station with other calls, I went up West White. And I sent the new brush truck with one of the firemen to close the top and bottom of West White.
Mhm.
He went up and closed the top. And when he came back down, the road was washed away. And the blacktop gave way, the truck
Okay,
went into the hole.
I vaguely recalled something like that. I just didn't remember the specifics. So yes, that will.
That was our brand new one.
That was a major
Yeah.
call, right?
Yeah, there was a rumor.
And
it was
how much
bad
of that
driving,
again
but
was
it
covered
wasn't.
by insurance?
I'd have to look back. I
But
don't.
some of
know.
it was.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
We're still waiting for small parts to come in.
Mhm.
Thing is still not completely fixed.
Message in the chat, what is,
That might be the OCC note.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
See, so recreation, it makes sense. We'd spend about half of the salaries because about half the summer's in FY, already passed.
Right.
Because we don't have salaries for that in the winter time. Fourth of July fireworks. We're gonna have to talk about that at the next meeting too. We need to get a deposit for. That's always the funny one.
Right,
We have
the prepaid.
to pay for it in fiscal year 25, but we don't get the actual fireworks until fiscal year 26.
Just as a side note on that. The company that we've been using for fireworks is reducing the number of slots that they can serve because they're having a hard time getting pyrotechnicians.
Oh,
Because we've always had such a good relationship with them, they save us a slot. But we do have to pay in a timely fashion, and so we need to authorize that at our next meeting.
It's on the agenda for
Yeah.
Monday.
But we have to be prepared for the cost of fireworks to go up just because there are fewer pyrotechnicians working in the industry these days.
so do we have an invoice that we could get in the packet for Monday night?
Did Sue send you that? Or she was
Um,
gonna call today and get the invoice, and hopefully we can get it to you in time for the packet.
Yeah, I know I put it on like approving an agreement, so at least you could approve the agreement, and then if we can tell them we promise to pay it.
Lisa?
Is there any interest in trying a drone show
They're still way too expensive.
if it's subsidized?
By who?
Me,
Okay, you're willing to subsidize $18,000?
more or less.
Okay, that can be discussed at come to a July 4th committee
I'm
meeting.
not gonna do it if people aren't willing to do it, but
I'm not opposed to drone shows. It's just, it's not sustainable over multiple years. So it'd either we'd have to have a very, very rich person keeping sponsoring it, or it'd have to be a one-off.
What's the price difference?
I'm
it's about
thinking
double.
about around $30,000 for the prices I've looked at,
Yeah,
30,000 versus
12,500. Or no, excuse me,
About 15.
Bill, he says it's gonna go up
14,000.
roughly double.
Yeah, 15,000.
I think we spent 13 on a budget of 15. We're probably gonna spend 15 this year from what I'm hearing.
That's what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Now, the big advantage of drone shows is that they can be as quiet or as loud as you want. Typically,
Right.
people play music during them, so they're not necessarily quieter,
Mhm,
but you can certainly turn off the music and have them be purely visual.
mhm.
But they don't go boom.
right?
Unless you make them play a sound that sounds like.
I'd consider that a big advantage, but a lot of people don't.
No, I think that is a reason to discuss it, because we are a very dog-friendly town and
Mhm. Well, I get nothing out of our appropriation for fireworks because I can't go. It bothers my ears too much.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I get tinnitus and so forth, and I'd like to see something, on 4th of July, but,
no, I agree. It's worth exploring. It's just,
mhm.
I think the cost will continue to come down. I just don't think we're at the point yet where we can consider it for every year.
That's why I'm making that offer.
Yeah.
Because
Sounds like
I'd like
it's
to kind
July
of push
4th.
the,
committee.
It does.
yeah, that would be a place to have it.
All right.
Should I bring that idea to them or do they want to?
Absolutely. Third Thursdays.
Okay.
So appropriations, some of them are already requested, some have not. So we're sort of up and down here, but still at about 30%.
And again, some of these really in our budget, as opposed to this, will not appear here because they will have been moved to more logical places.
Well, I think,
Like regional planning will not be showing up as,
but I think that we're running into the same numbering issue here.
Yes, exactly.
Even though we moved them in the budget.
no, I know, that's what
Oh,
I'm,
when we get to, oh, sorry. I was gonna say, yeah, so they're gonna continue to show here, unfortunately. All right, so that, yeah, so overall, we're at about 28 expended, 28%. A quarter into the budget. So. Close to 25, not perfect. And. With some appropriations coming in early. Certain things happening early, other things not. I think we're not, there's nothing jumping out that's like. Way over except for the
it would
flood.
have been nice if a December flood had been approved as a FEMA event. That would have helped.
It would have, but it wasn't, it also didn't have as much
Oh, no,
damage.
it
Yeah.
didn't, but there was
There was
cost,
still some cost to it for sure. Yeah, but that wouldn't have been in this one because this is the 25.
right?
All right, and then we can go to the highway. This,
Suzanne is on the call now.
She's been,
oh, she
Oh,
has been.
Suzanne, real quick, can you confirm that the annual meeting is next Monday?
Yes, the 18th.
Hey, I would have gone, but it's opposite our select board meeting. Why'd you do that?
Purely intentional.
No, that was not intentional. It was the availability of, Connie and Jessica and
Okay,
we could ask them to open the door.
what is right now, but
I
yeah,
think
we're at Campbell's Hump. We are having chili and pizza.
well, if you've got an annual report that spells out your financial situation, I imagine a number of us here would like to see it.
Yes, yeah, I'll be happy to send it.
Thanks.
So in highway, skipping into all highway, they're at right about 25% of the budget, which is fairly impressive considering all they've been doing is flood relief in FY25. If you look at salaries, I think they are a bit over, just based on salary highway. No, actually, they're under, but the overtime is a bit. It's earlier than it usually would be. Usually, when you get a lot of overtime till the winter. So,
Yeah.
And we've got that
flood
new
overtime.
tax, which is fairly small.
The new tax for $400, the childcare tax. Yep. Yep. That I think kind of covers us for the quarterly reports. You want to jump into the draft audit and unassigned restricted funds? This is where it gets real sort of challenging now for fiscal year 26. So I think a good spot to start here is unassigned reserve funds. Preface it a little bit with, for the last, well, maybe we'll start with this chart here. No, I've got the chart for unassigned funds. Let's tee this up with a little backup.
It's not a bad idea at all. I think that's worth exploring.
All right. So this chart here on the far right shows the amount of unassigned and restricted funds that we've put into the budget in the fiscal years 2019 through 2025. So you can see the general trend is upward. We started at about 90 and 161, 25, 90, and then in 23, put $919,000 in 24, 500, in 25, 433. I think the 2023 one was a lot of that went towards, I think, reserves, if I recall. So really the big numbers to look at is the last 2 years, about 500,000 and then 433,000. And that significantly helped us offset the tax rate, keep the tax
And a
rate.
lot of that flows back to the fact that we have an understaffed police department. When we started the agreement with Heinsberg, it went from 919 to 500,000 because at that point we're paying somebody else.
Yeah, and I think some of that, right. And then we also had still some FEMA money coming back and we hadn't had a lot of flooding yet. So the challenge this year is there anything to put towards the budget for this year?
As opposed to leaving it unassigned and waiting for the next huge flood.
Well, even, so let's back up here a little bit. So we do have the draft audit for FY24. And right now that is showing at the end of FY24, $340,000 in highway restricted funds. So that's money that's unassigned money that's in the highway department. So what we did was we looked at what things are gonna be adding, like, what are we getting in? So we're getting a 2019 closeout from the 2019 storm of $41,000. We're gonna get $199,000 still coming to us from the 2023 flood, so that's last year's flood. Another $93,000 still coming in from last year's flood. So all this year is a total of $294,000 that we're still going to be receiving in from FEMA in quarter two, most likely. We also have 2023 flood went from a 75% reimbursement by FEMA to 90%. So the amount that we're going to be receiving in addition here is $126,000 we should receive within hopefully the next few weeks for the 2023 flooding. Yes, Jay?
Okay, pardon the stupid questions, but so I see that we've got 2023 4 times.
Right.
3 of the
Yeah.
times it doesn't say at 90%. 1 of the times it does. Can you help me understand
Yeah.
the difference there?
But we probably could have, we were jamming on Friday to put this together. So these here are all money that's going to be coming in within the fiscal year 2025. That's all related back to the 2023 flood. And that's all at the 75% reimbursement.
Floods.
No, this is just
Just the
from
July
last
flood?
July.
Oh, we had 2 floods in July.
So the July flooding,
Okay.
I should say. So not anything for December. And yeah, we can represent this. So we were just trying to
No, it's okay.
we were grabbing pieces and putting it in. So it's a good
But there's a
question.
certain category of expenses from those floods that is reimbursed at a higher rate.
So everything that I just highlighted here is at the 75% rate from FEMA. Then like literally middle of last week, they said, oh, we just increased FEMA from 75 to 90%, which happens sometimes. So the 2019 storm was all reimbursed at 90%. So this 126 is the difference between everything at 75% and everything at
So that's
90.
an additional 15% more.
It's an additional 15% more. Yes.
Okay.
So we'll be getting that additional money here this fiscal
That
year.
math doesn't 100% seem to work.
Because there's also like $350,000 that's in FY that got booked back to FY 23 that we received as reimbursement. So
Okay,
yeah.
when you have a chance to organize it a little, but I understand the
yeah,
concept.
there's like 3 other spreadsheets that feed into this. So like I hear where you're going. That number doesn't.
So
tie
long
out.
story short, we've got a pretty sizable mountain of money so far, but then you've got.
And then we've got another $92,000 for the 2023 flood from FHWA. So there are certain roads that are not covered by FEMA. They're federal highway funding. So I think it's like, and I figure it has to do something with the category and the classification of the road, like Heinsberg Road, for instance, any damages on Heinsberg Road are covered by FHWA and not FEMA.
But if we destroy West White, that's FEMA.
That's FEMA. Yeah.
Stop destroying West.
I think Bridge Street and Heinsberg are the 2 that jump out at me that are FHWA. So we've got $92,000 still coming in from FHWA from the 2023 flood. So if you look at that, well, and then also there's this $10,000 from the windstorm. So we've got about $565,000 that will be coming into us this fiscal year from the 2023 flood. Then we have to put in some deferred expenses for Old Jericho Road and Dugway because part of the damages in 2023 were to Dugway Road and to Old Jericho Road, which is essentially a recreational trail right now. FEMA, since they're not completed, FEMA did an estimate on how much it's going to cost to construct those, and they've paid us out for that. So we then estimated, okay, if they gave us 75% of the estimated cost, $374,000 would be the total amount that we're going to have to pay to get those completed. So we're going to have to lay out all the money they gave us, plus the additional 25% to complete those 2 damaged sites. So that's money that we got that we have to account for going back out. Everything else that we got, like West White from last year, we paid all the money, we got reimbursed. And then we have 1.89 million in 2024 flood expenses that we've paid out. So that gives us a net loss of $1.7 million projected changes to unassigned funds in highway. So then that predicts our year-end balance of taking the 340 that we started with, dropping it by the 1.7, and we end up with negative $1.36 million in the highway fund, based on the ins and the outs of the 23 flood coming in, the 24 flood going out.
And
We did not predict any reimbursements from the 24 flood in FY 25. It's possible we get some money back on the flood in FY 25. And even though things seem to be going pretty well with FEMA right now, I don't want to start to project that we're going to get money back on that because I just don't know. Chances are it took us a year to get any money from last flood. It'll probably take us till July or August to get any money from this flood too. We're just not close enough. If we had some projects submitted, I would feel more comfortable putting that in. We probably won't even get projects submitted until January or February. It just takes a lot of time to get all the data that they need, organize everything and get it into them.
So
Yeah.
far, we don't have money. It looks like we don't have money to put toward the budget from unassigned because we're severely negative.
I would say that's.
I just wanted to put that in
assessment.
English. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for taking my long explanation. That's correct. Then in unassigned funds, this is everything except for FEMA. We had an audited balance of $1,175,000 at the end of FY 24. This is where we budgeted $433,000 to go into the FY 25 budget. So we'll take that off. We do have some reimbursements from the 2019 flood that are still coming in, about $5,000 we should receive shortly.
Is that still in relation to that culvert in Thompson Road, or is there something else?
Yeah, so the way it works is, so in 2019, I think we got paid out probably within a year or so for the majority of the damage. Then we also had the Dugway Road mitigation project and the Thompson Road culvert. Both of those projects took a little longer to complete. Dugway was finished first of those two, and then Thompson Road took a little bit longer. So then they paid us out the 90% on both of those projects pretty quickly after they were completed. The portion that then takes a little bit longer to get is there's the ERAF that you see here. That's the state portion. So FEMA pays, well, in this case, FEMA paid 90%. Then the state pays an additional 7% of all the damages, and that is what we call the ERAF, or the state portion. But that doesn't come to you until it's fully closed. And the same thing with the category Z. Cat Z is basically all the administration time. So Duncan's time, my time, Pete's time, not responding to the flood, but working with FEMA to get reimbursed. So we submit the administrative costs and Connie's time too. So we still have that coming to us from 2019. It takes some time to get reimbursed on that, but that's also kind of the big bulk of that here is the 41,940 that's coming into highway. That's why most of it's highway money, because it's the 7% from the state on the damages.
Bard?
So, and I think it's worth affirming this. So that administrative time, which is now many years ago, already long paid for, incurred, this becomes sort of gift money paying you for something you all paid for 5 years ago.
Yep. Yeah. And then spinning that forward. So for the 23 flood, expect in 2 or 3 years when that finally closes out, because we have to finish Old Jericho Road and Dugway still, and hopefully we finish those next year. We will then get that category Z and ERAF money, but that's going to be at least 2 years away.
So again, it's modest money. It's not the same as, oh, I hired a contractor to go fix something and then I have to get repaid for that. This was our staff time, presumably is already in the budget. And now it's paid for from another source. So it really is like found money.
Yeah, and that's part of what goes to the amount that we've had for unassigned restricted funds over the years.
Yeah.
It's police savings, but it's also somewhat unanticipated revenue like this from previous disasters.
Follow June real quick.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
June, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to understand this on the 374,000 for the deferred expense for Old Jericho Road and Dugway. So we've received that money, correct?
We received less than 374, but we received 75% of 374.
Okay. So where does that show up? Because wouldn't that number then be the 25% that we will need as an expense?
Well, so that money is included in the money that has come in up here, or money that came in FY 24. So we've already realized that revenue. And then this is what we're saying is we've realized revenue, it's mixed into all of these things or stuff that came in 24. But we know we have to still do those repairs, and the total cost of those repairs is estimated at the 374.
Okay, so, and that doesn't add up to 374, but
No, and again,
In
there's like 4 different spreadsheets we have to put this together to come here.
is
So
that on the website?
no, it's not. Let me see. I think I could. Would it get too confusing to show?
You can just send it to me later if you want.
Yeah, that might be easier than trying to walk through the whole thing. So in admin, we will get some flood reimbursements. This is that's where I had made some notes. This is for we had some dumpsters from 2023 that are going to get reimbursed. We also had expenses at the park that are going to get reimbursed 2023. And then in 24, we have, oh, sorry, this is the recreation stuff. This is, what was that from? It was part of that 128, Connie, and that was, maybe I do need to go to my other sheet.
Oh, that was the one that was split between water.
Yeah, it was recreation. And so that's, I think, mostly no, this is the recreation. This was dumpsters and um, I have to pull it out, but it's more FEMA money coming back that's not highway. So
Park?
wait a minute, and let me pull it up. Then it's bugging me that I can't remember that.
I think that's about what we spent at the park, isn't it?
Yeah. Give me a second.
Didn't 5,000 go somewhere in this?
Okay.
I think that's over in the cash flow one.
While we're looking, I'd just like to remind the people who did not show up in person that you missed the opportunity to consume some of Jay Furr's pies.
There's, yeah, you too. Have some fun.
Right. Okay. So that was.
Camera.
I'll be right there.
It's right over there.
Just kidding.
So that was the reimbursement for Volunteers Green, the playground, and the ball field cleanup. That's the that's what that reimbursement is this 35. Let me share the screen again. That's what the $35,000 reimbursement is. Then these expenses, that's the dumpsters from 24, that's Volunteers Green and restrooms from 24. So our net loss in this is $461,000. So our unassigned goes from 1,175, reduces by 461, ends up with 713,000. So then our combined total between highway at 1.3 projected negative 713 in non-highway, we're at negative 646 projected by the end of the year. Now this is a projection, and it assumes everything in the budget comes in on budget. So this assumes police comes in on budget, which we know it's probably not going to. But if we're just looking at kind of what we know right now, that's where we're at with unassigned and restricted funds, which leaves us with really nothing to put towards the budget.
But, you know, when I think about the financial management of that, the reason we don't is because we've used money to pay for a large sum of expenses that are reimbursable at a future stage.
Yeah.
So this is not an unavoidable problem. This is a choice we've made to use our funds in this way. There are other options if we choose to entertain.
Well, we're saving money by doing this too, I think. So,
Well,
I mean.
yes and no.
Unless probably if we're going to borrow.
But at some future date, that 1.89609 times 0.9.
Shows
that it's gonna.
Well, that'll probably be by 0.75 because
Okay, but,
usually it's at 75%. So yeah, we'll get about $1.5 million between those expenses and then admin expenses, because there's
I
about $2
think those will
million.
come in Q2 of.
No,
No, I
That'll-
mean,
Okay, what's our
sorry, that-
best case scenario,
I'm,
that 2024 reimbursement coming in?
yeah, I would say probably not until next summer. So I don't think it's gonna happen in this.
So into the
fiscal year.
2026,
yeah.
Into the 26.
okay, so we cannot take,
Yeah, I don't think we can
Even if
count
it,
on that.
when it comes in, it still won't be unassigned funds unless we take a loan this year.
Right. So.
When it
that-
comes in, we'll be replenishing reserves.
So, this is part of my point. So if we take away unassigned funds and pay for these things that are reimbursed, then we take out our reimbursement and put it into reserve funds. We have, it would appear to me that's a choice we're making.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that everyone would agree with that choice.
So we could look, I think another good spot to look at is cash flow.
June raise.
Oh, boy.
Go ahead, June.
Josh, you can finish and I'll go.
No, go ahead. I was gonna move on to sort of a different interpretation or a different projection. So if you have a question on this one, go now.
Yes, I feel like based on the fact, because we had a town meeting on Saturday and you asked to borrow funds, from the special reserve fund that was established. I don't understand why you would take money out of a fund, any line item, and then reimburse it to a different area. Why would you do that?
In other words, pay for it out of our unassigned funds, then when we get our future account receivable, that's how I think of it as a long-term account receivable.
Sure.
Then when we receive it, put it into reserve funds. That's kind of June's point, I think.
Yes, you're taking a loan from one fund and paying it into a different fund. It should go back to unassigned funds where it came out of.
Okay,
No.
help
Why?
us
You're talking about when we get the reimbursement?
Yes.
So unless we take a loan, what we're actually doing right now is we are using the cash from our reserves to pay, we used the cash
Yeah.
from 4 specific reserves to pay all those expenses. So now, and this is what we've been legally told we can do, when we get that money back, we have to, when we get the money from FEMA, we then have to put the money, the cash, back into those reserves.
So I'm looking at this. I think if you borrow from reserves, this is an accounting question. If I borrow 100,000 from the reserve fund, I got to pay it back. But if I take 500,000 from unassigned funds,
Right.
wouldn't I put the 500,000 back in unassigned funds? I think June's principle is put it back where you borrowed it from.
Right.
And that's not one place, it's several places, is it not?
It gets complicated because we're
I
talking
know.
about reserves, and when unassigned funds aren't actually a fund.
Right, they are what they say.
It's,
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
cash. So one thing is
Mhm.
cash flow and the other thing is our reserves. We're really not, I'm not going to do an accounting transaction saying, hey, we took this much out of the reserve. That's not going to happen. But we're using the cash that is due to those reserves. So say we have 2 million in our bank account, and of that 2 million, 1.9 of it is what we've built up in reserves. The reserve itself isn't going to go down. Our cash goes down. But what we have to think about is when the FEMA money comes in, and I'm looking forward in our capital plan, it's like, okay, we have a dump truck and a pickup truck to pay for next July. We probably won't get FEMA money until much longer after that. So how do we pay for that? We don't.
Josh, could you pull up the sheet you were just showing? Because didn't it show us using unassigned funds to pay for these expenses?
Some, yes.
Well, this is my key question. Define some.
The difference between what's in cash flow.
Well, I'm looking for a
Unassigned
dollar
funds.
figure.
Gotcha.
I totally get, we should be able to account for our reserve funds.
Mhm.
If this is our portfolio of reserves, and if we are taking money away from them or money we're going to invest in them, I think we should replenish dollar for dollar. But this analysis seems to suggest we're taking it from unassigned funds that would otherwise be used to reduce taxes. And if we're taking the dollars that would otherwise be used to reduce taxes and putting it in reserve, we have the net impact of increasing taxes that we otherwise wouldn't do.
But we're not putting it in reserve, we're spending that money on the flood. So
But when
I
we
think
get
I'm
paid
mentioning it
back,
somewhere.
what happens when we get paid back? So if I take, how much are we taking out of unassigned
When we
funds?
get paid back, then our unassigned funds will grow again.
That's,
And then we
that's
can start
June's
using
question
that to pay down, to reduce the tax rate,
at a future date.
At a future date,
right?
but right now, I don't know that we have any money to put.
I guess it's
Perfect.
not,
So wait, where I think I'm close to understanding your, because right now, we don't have like, we're projecting to have no unassigned funds by the end of the year, so we don't have anything to put towards next year's tax. But I think you're coming at it from a different angle.
Well, the reason we don't is because we used it for reimbursable expenses. Yes. And so when we get those expenses reimbursed, it should go back into the unassigned funds from whence it came.
And it will, because there's really no other place
But
for it
that's
to go.
June's question is, that's not what Connie seemed to say, that it would go into reserve.
Well, so there's really no actual. So, well, let's go to the, like,
But while you're looking that up, we need a bridge to get back there.
right, I mean, because we're not gonna get any of this money until this time next year or so, or
Right.
in summer of next year, so we can't really project that we have money to put towards the offset at this point.
I get it. I'm thinking more as an accounting principle to put, and I think this was June's idea, which resonates with me, that you put the money back where it came from.
Right.
If I put 50, I took 50 from here, I put 50 back. If I took 1 million from here, I put 1 million back. 10,000, I put it back there. So that's an accounting challenge, put it back where it came from. As
So,
opposed to now I get paid and I put my unassigned funds into reserve, which is not where it came from.
okay, so let's
We wouldn't
not,
put it into
let's
a-
not call it borrowing from the reserve. We're borrowing from the checking account.
yeah, so
And
maybe
that
the
check,
cash
of
flow
that checking
maybe
account,
this
this
would-
much
maybe this
belongs to
would
the
actually-
reserves.
help a little bit, so these are, at the end of quarter four on a cash flow basis,
Mhm.
and this doesn't, again, there's flaws and differences on both of these between cash flow and what we just looked at, but we're projecting as best we can with that we'd have $2.3 million in the bank. Okay. Our total reserves are $2.8 million. So based on this cash flow projection, we're about $500,000 in the hole, right? So that includes our budget, all of our reserves. That's where we would be at. If we look at the special project reserve fund, which is what we just voted on Saturday, that we said we're gonna put $795,000 in there. If we take that away, then our reserves without that are at 2 million. So then we're at $300,000 to the good at the end of,
If we're using the special project.
if we say we're gonna use that money and we're gonna sort of like, we're gonna spend all of our cash down. And then we'll start to spend into that. We'd still have $305,000 on the cash flow at the end of the fiscal year.
Then how are we paying for pickleball?
Well, so pickleball is already paid for. So that's.
This is, okay, this is purely, absolutely non-allocated.
This is non-allocated. This is
Okay.
stuff, so we wouldn't be able to pay for a parking lot at Brown's Court. That's not in here. We wouldn't be able to pay for a new playground. That's not in here, but
Or a
pickleball,
large parking garage on Volunteer Screen, okay.
pickleball, since it's already under contract, that would not be in here. So this
Okay.
is, so that would essentially pause all future
ARPA-like stuff
ARPA-like stuff
until we can pay it back.
until we can pay it back. Until we get paid back, which could be, then at that point, we get into like, summer of next year, we get that money back. It goes back into the special projects reserve. And then we can start to think about where we're gonna go with. And that's part of the reason why we did that, was so that we could keep that money there. The other thing we can borrow from is the highway reserve balance. So that's $700,000. So if we take the 2.8 million minus the 700,000, that leaves us with 2.1 million, which would leave us with $211,000. And that's say we spent all the highway reserves on this, and then we would need to pay back that 700,000.
And if we just said Katie bar the door and do all the ARPA money and all the highway reserve money,
Then we would be at $1 million in the black at the end of FY 24.
which we could and here's where I'm wanting to not get laughed at. We could then use that money to reduce, toward the budget.
I mean.
No, I'm getting a massive no.
Massive no.
Okay,
No.
when you talk about having all this money in the black, it isn't, it isn't.
It will be, I mean, I guess.
It's cash.
It's cash, but do you want to borrow from reserves to offset the?
No, I don't really. I just
So,
want to
like,
make sure that when we're saying, we're acting very glib, like, here's all this money, but
But this is like more of our, like, we did this to look at the cash flow to say, like, when we first looked at this, we went, yikes, we're gonna need a loan of some sort just to get through that 480.
unfortunately, the expenses came in less than we thought they would.
Well, this includes all the expenses that we, so,
Which are less than what the.
well, we initially thought like 2 million, then we thought 1.5, we're closer to 2 million, and that's included in this. And so having the ability to have the 795 and the 700 that we can essentially borrow from, that allows us to cover this 498, cover all of our expenses, not get in trouble with the lawyers by saying like, oh, you borrowed from a reserve you shouldn't have borrowed from. And then as we get paid back with the cash, our cash account goes back up, we're able to level those off.
Put it back where it
When
came
we
from.
say borrow, we're really not, there's no transaction in the highway capital fund that is going to say, I lent this money to the general fund. What's happening is we are using the cash that belongs to them, which means now they can't go do something because there's not enough cash to do it. If we get a loan, if we get what they would call a bridge loan, but we don't know if we'll qualify for that through the bond bank. But if we could, then yeah, we could very likely end up with unassigned funds at some point. But we got to pay the loan back.
I mean, I'm sure we, even if we just do this, like we get through it, we have enough money to like meet all of our expenses for 24. Those reserves will look low at the end of FY 24. Then we'll get paid back. They'll essentially get paid back with the cash in the bank account, and then we'll get to unassigned restricted funds again. But
On paper, the reserve won't. It's
on
not going
paper,
to
it won't, but there
change.
will be no money in the bank to cover it.
Correct.
Let me
Or
go back to
not
the
enough.
beginning. How much of unassigned funds are we contributing towards these costs?
Towards these cash flow costs.
Towards all the FEMA expenses that are going to be reimbursed later.
So that I think gets us back to,
So say highway, we end at June of 24,
I'm not talking
highway.
reserve funds.
I'm not, at the end of June of 24. Highway had $340,000 of unassigned funds. At the end of this year, highway has negative $1,659,579. It doesn't exist. Highway's in the red.
Okay.
And then you go to general at the end of June had 1,175,484. At the end of this fiscal year, we're predicting $221,296.
where are you?
Is this making sense to you?
Why are you off of my numbers?
You got yours done
You
differently.
just raised your hand.
But no, it's there. Your 221,296 is there. 221,296 over.
Where are you going?
Move your
What's up?
box one to the right. No,
The other right.
column it right there.
Oh,
Oh, no,
20.
you're looking at that's over the 15%. No.
Oh,
so-
over the
Yeah,
15%. Okay.
so our highway restricted funds goes from 340 to negative 1.3 in real money. This is 15%. Don't even look at that. Then our unassigned fund goes from 1.175 to 713,000 for a combined total of negative 646 will be overspent.
Right.
Go ahead, June.
Thank you. Again, I'm just trying to understand this. So if you're saying you're using unassigned funds to cover these expenses, and so you're not going to be able to budget any money to help reduce the tax rate. If that money comes back and you put it into restricted, you still can't do that the following year when that money comes back. So
So next year we could, because we'd have like, if we get $1.5 million reimbursed from FEMA, but in August of next year, then we're
Yes,
having a very different conversation in the, you know, for the FY 27 budget.
okay, just want to make sure it's going into unassigned funds instead of a reserve account.
Right, no, it would not go into a reserve account. It would, the only way it would, like, basically those, think of those reserve accounts as sort of our, of like, the highway and the special projects fund is what's gonna float this 646 negative, right? If you kind of look at it that way.
Mhm.
Like, like if we had no reserve accounts, we'd be in the whole 646. But since we have $1.4 million in those reserve accounts, we will essentially be able to pay our bills with that money. Right? And then when that unassigned fund comes in, we'll have to make sure those reserves are paid back up, and then everything else goes over that.
But at some point in the future, just, I want to
Yeah.
confirm this. What's the figure that we're taking out of unassigned funds that will come back and go back into one?
So that's so unassigned, it's not like an actual fund, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like
It's a number.
but it fluctuates every year, right? So
I know,
yeah.
but what is my key point? And I think it's June's as well.
Yes,
That when you get it paid back, don't be sticking it into reserve funds.
No.
So if you can't call it something, you gotta call it something to put
So
it back.
the only money that would go back into the reserve funds is essentially like what we took out, right? So let's look at it this way. If we were 646 in the hole, okay, and then let's say that all of that came out of the special projects fund. So we take that the special projects fund basically floated all of our cash to the end of 24, right? So now we've spent all the money we have on hand, plus $646,000 of special project reserve fund. The first 646 that we get back would pay back the special project reserve fund. Anything over 646 is unassigned and restricted.
That's what I think
That's, yes.
June and I are looking for.
Okay, and that, yeah, I agree with you. I don't know why it took us so long to get there.
The way you put it.
Okay, maybe I just say it right the first 5 times. Apparently I didn't.
Well, he was understanding you the whole
I
time,
don't, okay.
or he's faking it very well.
But yeah, I think if we look at it as one fund, the special project reserve, and we
This
say
year's
that
unassigned,
646
unassigned.
deficit is paid for by that, then yes, anything over and above that comes back. So essentially, if we get 1.5 back and 646 goes back to special projects reserve, we'll have $900,000 that will end up in unassigned and reserve funds.
So now that we understand that, I don't want to break concentration, but I am asking a serious question. When those funds are paid back from where they came, would interest be paid back too, or is it
We have
just,
to pay ourselves in.
Right, to be our own.
We're not gonna pay ourselves
if that
interest.
were sitting in the bank, it would be accruing interest, so we're actually shortchanging those funds
Well,
by not
yeah.
accounting for the interest that it would have earned.
Yeah, but
Just putting
FEMA
that
won't,
out there.
But
FEMA won't
FEMA,
reimburse us for interest.
if we had to take a bond,
Oh,
FEMA,
I know.
FEMA would pay for the interest. So,
Can you read, Jim?
Was that Jim trying to pitch in?
I think there's no provision for imputed interest.
Okay,
It's the interest cost avoided by not taking a bridge loan.
right. No, I'm just putting that out there that
Yeah, no, yeah, but
there's black, white, and gray.
That at the end of the day, there's less revenue than otherwise would exist in a
Right.
reserve fund.
Because if it were just sitting in an interest-bearing account for a year and a half, there'd be more money there than if we stated what it was 6 months ago.
Now legally, and our attorneys and auditors don't agree fully, but legally, our attorney is saying we can only borrow cash. We can only use cash related to very specific reserves accounts. That being accounts that were designed to do the type of thing that the flood impacted. So we can use the bridge and culvert cash, not as an expense of revenue, but we can use that to pay for these expenses. We can use the highway capital one. We can use the highway guardrail one. We cannot use cash as related to Conservation Commission or any other
The tennis fund.
reserve. So even though our reserves total over 2 million, we cannot use cash related to that.
And that's why we had the addendum to the special project reserve fund to make sure that it was clear the voters said you can use that as a loan to yourself.
But
Or,
not for water and sewer.
Not the water and sewer. That was clear. That was clear. So, I think we got there as far as an understanding.
Yeah.
I don't think we got there as far as finding more money. But I think we got there that like,
Time is money.
that's how it would work.
So the
But-
allocated funds that will be depleted will be paid back proportionally.
The
Yes.
cash.
And the real lead weight that drops like a rock is we're gonna have the highest tax increase in recorded memory because we have no money to offset the tax rate.
That's,
Correct.
yeah,
That's just all, and there's no place we can just say, cut that, because health insurance
yeah.
is health insurance.
It's like 9%.
So we might want to move on to agenda item D at
Mhm.
this point, because I think Jay makes a good segue to that right now. So let me just time note that. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing this. So right, so on the budget, just run through a few, maybe I'll call this up because it might be helpful to visually see this. I put it in the memo, but I think
Mhm.
putting it on the screen will be helpful. All right. So this is where Jay was going. Nope,
No,
hit the wrong button.
Hmm.
So I went for Zoom and I hit stop share. Okay, so the budget as presented right now does not include any offsets from unassigned or restricted funds. And it shows a 21.81% increase in tax rate over the FY 25 tax rate.
and that's what I was referring to as the
Yeah.
big lead. weight.
So let me walk through a couple of these scenarios, just because I think this will help us sort of see where we're at with this 433. If we had added $433,000 into revenue for FY 26, it would reduce the tax rate to 10.83, the increase, I should say. The biggest driver, one of the biggest drivers of increases in the FY 26 is the addition of 3 staff members. If we took that out and went with additional, same staffing, just with regular annual raises, the increase would be 17.08%. That's without using any unassigned funds. If we then took that same budget and added in $433,000 in unassigned funds, we have a 6.10% increase. If we remove the 3 staffing requests, as well as $80,000 in police capital for a new police cruiser, which I think we need, but if we were gonna cut something out, we can cut that out. That would be a 15% increase. Or if we used 433, that would be a 4.07% increase. Then I looked at if we kept all expenses and revenue flat to last year, but with taking out voted on appropriations and conservation reserve fund from FY 26, knowing that like that wouldn't be part of the budget, and not including $433,000 in unassigned funds, we're at an 8.5% increase. So,
Okay, I feel very stupid again.
okay.
I thought went through a whole exercise showing we didn't have 433 when
We
it.
don't. So I'm using the 433 to show
This is
how
what
that,
happened
how
last
that,
year.
how that increased.
Also, in the world with pink magical unicorns where we have that money, this,
So this is just, no, so I'm using it as an example to say that even if we kept all this is really the number that means something here. If we kept everything flat to last year, right? All the expenses are the same as last year. We just don't have the conservation reserve or appropriation. So we're actually a little less on expenses. And we don't have that $433,000 in unassigned funds. We're at an
It's still like that.
8.5% increase. So that's what I'm saying, that 433, it essentially reduces the tax rate increase by about 11%.
So the 433, that number, where did that?
So that's what we used in this year's fiscal.
Okay,
budget.
so that's.
Sorry. So that's what I'm using.
That's the example. Okay.
That's why I'm using that.
Example.
Yeah, I'm using that to say like, basically, if we had our flat budget, everything flat, 100% flat, we're still at an 8.55% tax rate increase because we don't have 433 to use.
What if we have select board salaries?
We cut those in half.
Yeah.
then that 8.55 goes to 8.495.
And we would.
Not worth as much as we.
Yeah, no, but I think, but this is the,
No, this is my point is
yeah,
that
this
we're-
is your
we're
point.
proposed.
And this is the point that I'm like, yikes, what do we do? Because
But the-
we've been using 500,000 and then 433,000 to keep
And
that
people
tax
got
rate
used
down.
to it.
Yep.
And there was no reason not to, because we had the money,
We had the money.
but on the other hand, assuming that we have no more catastrophic floods, which we will, right? But if we didn't, when that big chunk of money comes in from FEMA and we repay our funds, there would still be so money left over for that year when it happens.
Yep.
That's assuming no more floods,
Right.
which is completely unrealistic.
And careless.
Yeah, I mean, this time next year, if we have no floods, we'll have our unassigned reserve funds will buoy back up. And we might have money to put towards FY 27, but that doesn't solve our FY 26.
No, it doesn't.
So, right, we have
May I
this.
mention,
Go ahead.
I'm not recommending this, but another option is, in anticipation of FEMA reimbursement, we could borrow as opposed to cleaning out all of our accounts. Since again, we have a cash flow deficit because we're using our unassigned for flood expenses. We could borrow against that anticipated FEMA reimbursement and
Borrow from
maintain a
banker.
balance.
Mhm.
But I don't think there's even a bond bank program right now for flood reimbursements, is there?
It's coming.
It's
So-
coming, but.
Yeah, and I know the feasibility because it also
1.3.
typically you can only borrow for so long and FEMA is unreliable when they reimburse. But
Yeah,
we are whipsawing the tax increases because have the luxury of using our own funds to cover the storm expenses.
Art?
So this is where very early in this conversation, I was suggesting there were other options. Jim has just pointed to one of them, which is sort of another, perhaps most obvious one. Many businesses would not clear out all their cash flow to avoid taking a loan. They would take a loan to level things out. So
Just in case.
I think we should at least explore what that scenario looks like in terms of both cost and tax impact. What would it look like if we borrowed X amount of dollars, kept the unassigned funds, did some offset, and we have some interest payments to make, but
1.3% interest is not that terrible.
it's not that terrible, and it has the potential impact without having done an analysis of flattening out the ups and downs. Like, I don't want to find ourselves raising taxes by 10% and then
Yeah.
dropping taxes by 5% and then
Yeah,
raising them by
Be
10 or
interested to see
15.
what Jim has to say, because.
And you don't have to borrow all the FEMA anticipated. You could, for example, borrow $433,186, which is a small portion of or a 25 or 30% portion of FEMA.
June, what do you think about that? This is kind of your expertise.
I agree with both Jim and Bard because what makes most sense is if you're looking at loans that are 1.2%, what are you getting on your CDs right now? You know, if you're going to pay less interest on a loan than what you're giving up on what you've got in the bank, it doesn't make sense not to take the loan.
Well, no, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I think CDs are on hold for indefinitely at this point.
Yeah.
We have to, I think, I'd love to explore the loan option. My understanding right now is the bond bank doesn't have one
Yet.
yet,
It's coming.
and when they do have one, we'll have to see if we qualify.
Right.
They're gonna go, because other towns, like, just to put it in a little perspective, like, our flood expenses were about $2 million, our budget's about 5 million. Town of Bolton, I think, is like double their annual budget in flood expenses. So towns like, I'm just saying that towns like that are probably gonna get priority over us. I mean, who knows, maybe there'll be plenty of money, and I'd love to see that program if they can get that out soon.
But I think Bart's
Yeah.
point about not having these.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely worth exploring, because otherwise we could be in the position of the voters finally rebel and turn
Yeah.
this down.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree.
This is the year that if you don't give a little bit of a break, it's going to impact so many people because the education tax went up and our reassessments. And so I feel like it's at least worth looking at so that we don't drain our accounts. We have the money for a rainy day and we're not impacting the property owners as much as it looks like we're going to do.
My bigger concern is that we don't take a loan. We let our cash dwindle down to that 400 something thousand. And we have a storm in July. Now we're
Nope.
faced with we don't have the cash to do the repair immediately. Our bank account looks pretty sad from this year's. It's gonna be hard getting a loan and getting it quickly, and these contractors want to be paid
Today.
within a couple of
It's
weeks.
easiest to get a loan when you don't need it.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was my point about a business. No business would get their cash down to zero and cross their fingers. You just, that's
Right.
insane, right?
Mhm.
Right.
So it seems to me we have to go down this path. We, not for nothing, so to speak, we set a target percentage increase, and I think we need to clearly come closer to our target than these 10,
Oh, yeah.
15, 20% things. And it would appear to me the one tool available is a loan. And so I guess the question is, what loan under what circumstances? Lots of other towns are dealing with the same thing in
Yep.
preparation for town meetings. So what do we know about the timeline and the wheels turning on the loan or bond bank opportunities?
The bond bank would be something similar to last year, 1.3%. My understanding is you don't pay on the interest. They're calling it a bridge loan.
Mhm.
And its intended purpose is to hold you until you get your money from FEMA. But as Josh said, we're probably not going to be eligible
Well,
for it.
We might be.
We
Like I
might
say,
be.
It's gonna be a competitive process. We have to, so it's not a guarantee that if they announce the program, we can get it. We also have to figure out borrowing authority. We have to confirm.
Right.
Because there's certain amounts that, and lengths of time that only the voters can approve. And we don't have time to really approve that before the end of our budget season. So we need to confirm the process by which we can borrow.
Then aside from
Because
that,
because the
you've
select board
got-
doesn't have like full borrowing authority without. like,
No, at some point
bonding.
we have to,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm raising my hand because we have members of the audience who have very confused looks on their faces. And I'm wondering, do y'all have any questions? I mean, we're grateful you're here.
They just came for the.
I'm the new library director.
Yeah. Sorry.
I hadn't met you yet.
Sorry, yeah.
And this is Kathy Templin, who's a
Library trustee.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have any questions, since, you're part of this whole thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
And I did ask select board, department heads to be here. Just because if we have questions, it's helpful to have them here. I realize we may not be getting fully into the department. But by
Right.
department budget
Mm.
tonight, because there's a lot of bigger things to look at, but I appreciate all of you being here.
Yes.
And thank you.
okay, so let's say that, I think a pretty good case can be made for not draining our reserves and taking a loan. Let's say that the Vermont Bond Bank says, no, Bolton and Wolcott and Ludlow are all much worse off than you. You don't get this. What kind of rate would we be looking at from a commercial lender or from some alternate?
You could say a tax anticipation note, but that means increasing your taxes to cover that note. Significantly. Most banks, when I've gone to them for loans, they're not in it for long term. So they're talking, maybe a 5-year loan, but that would be all we needed while we waited for FEMA. Maybe a 2-year loan, but
I have no idea kind
we
of,
still have to pay for that.
why, I know, I'm saying what kind of, give me an exact to the decimal point answer of what our rate would be from a bank. I'm kidding, but I mean, what are we looking at?
So maybe we should,
Ready?
let's reach out to TD Bank and a few others and see.
North,
What would they even have for us? If we said we need $1 million right now, we know we're gonna get paid back by FEMA, what could you do? And then let's figure out what they could do, what the price would be, or the rate would be, and what we would need for borrowing authority, because if we only need it for a year, maybe the board has the authority to say, we'll take it for a year in anticipation of FEMA paying us back. Let's explore it.
Sorry.
I think we should be coming back when's our next meeting?
Second Monday in December.
Unless we call a special one for the fifth.
I think we probably do it before then. And I think we do want to come up with some scenarios of how much money, what would it cost, and what's the authority of doing it? At least one, if not two or three scenarios to flatten out the vagaries of ups and downs based on our cash flow. And this is why some businesses have lines of credit, right? Like I got a bunch of accounts receivable. I know I'm going to get the money later, but I don't want to deplete my cash now and then hit a wall.
Chris?
Well, I this all makes sense to me, though I hate to, I would be remiss not to bring up a factor that there's a certain degree of uncertainty about the FEMA repayments. And they've been very good about doing it. The uncertainty so far has been about when, not what so much, but the what is not necessarily a given either, particularly with the change in administration.
Exactly. I just had that popped into my head. What if they just defund FEMA as some of the
Or what if they just don't replenish it? I mean, they have that takes action by Congress, I believe, and we've already seen the replenishment rate change in our favor, but it could easily go the other way too. So if I were as a banker offering a line of credit on this, it would probably be with a pretty hefty interest rate.
And yet, it's not like we're asking to borrow our entire town budget like Bolton or twice our town budget. We have ways that we could pay this back if we had to, even absent FEMA. We could like figure it out over time, and those would be substantial tax increases over the long haul
To use those
based
funds.
on federal policy and what happens with FEMA. But that becomes not just a financial issue, but a political issue for the new administration. Is that what they want to do or not?
Right.
Use those funds, we'd have to restrict them, I think.
So it seems to me we can't really move forward on this tonight, but we want a couple of scenarios and be thoughtful about risks. But whatever we have to pay, we're going to figure out a way to pay for it eventually. It just seems to me that one of our goals should be to flatten out ups and downs that are arbitrary based on FEMA and the cycles of both expenses and reimbursement, if we can. The equivalent of a line of credit for a larger corporation.
Jim?
Yeah, and I would just, doing that homework about what's available, I would also say that we should do a rough 3 or 5 year cash flow scenario with the thought of, as budgets typically go up, what will our expenses be? What will, if we get FEMA reimbursement, how much will we have in excess, and to the goal of smoothing out future shocks on the taxpayers.
Agreed.
So I just checked, and it looks like we're looking at $12 million to $18 million per kilometer to build a dike along the Winooski. Thought I'd throw that out.
Place to put our bathrooms.
And the real sad part about that is we'd still have $1 million in flood damage. Because most of our flood damage was not along the Winooski. It would save a ton of private homes and the park would be great.
Yeah.
But Dugway, West White, Heinsberg, they'd all still be hammered.
Snipe Ireland.
They'd all, yeah, Jones Mill, they'd all still get hit.
Okay. Then we're the dome, exactly. We're
The
gonna
dome.
build the Winooski Dome.
Might be less than a
Dolly
dollar.
Shore, the biodome. Maybe.
So is this a plausible ask to come back and
Yeah, I think we gotta look at some
pursue this
options.
further to say,
We have
what's
to.
the right timeline, and do we do it at our next regular meeting? Do we do a special?
Yeah.
meeting?
I mean, our next regular meeting is next week, which we have like 2 days to prepare for. And then,
Oh, God.
I mean, we might, let's see, there's the 25th, which is the Monday before Thanksgiving. But we might, let's see where we can get with some options, and let's keep the 25th open potentially. I mean, because in theory, it would be a meeting just focused on options, right?
Yeah.
And budget options.
And
Yeah.
keep it to like
And
an
if we,
hour, hour.
and if we have an update by the end of this week that we can slide it into the meeting on Monday, then we can. But yeah, if we could do something quick on the 25th, that might be an option.
I guess I want some clarity what I'm gonna be looking at, because right now we're showing negative unassigned numbers.
Well,
So are we borrowing enough to cover those negatives and give us extra to throw at the budget?
So I would base it on the 1.5 million, right? Because
That's what I'm, yeah,
that's what we anticipate getting paid back by FEMA relatively within a year. It's
Yeah.
about 1.5 of the full $2 million.
Yeah.
So I think if we base it on that, then that would give us plenty of flexibility.
Yeah.
And if we
Well-
want to go, we could talk about going lower, but that would basically cover us.
that's the only way we can throw something. I mean, but we also need to
think,
keep in mind
So we're spending.
that when we look at unassigned funds and using it, we really should be using them for one-time purchases.
Well, that boat has sailed.
Yeah, I know that boat sailed several years ago.
I think what we needed, I think ideally what would be great if we if all flooding was assigned, if we had, like Bart saying, like a way to kind of wean ourselves off of that so that it's a reduction slowly over the unassigned and a slight increase in tax rate. So we don't do it all at once. Pulling the Band-Aid off at 20%, that is probably not going to fly.
I just picture,
Yeah.
people I know will vote it down. That's absurd. I can't afford that. So
yeah.
it seems fruitless to pursue that path.
Yep.
On that note, I know we discussed it briefly, but are we going to consider restructuring how we present this budget?
To chop it into
On the
departments
ballot.
Like police.
I don't even know where to begin with that. Like, do we do public safety with police and fire and then?
Before we move to that, are we done with this though? Like,
Yeah.
I think if we do 1.5 and just arbitrarily, if they're concerned about the price point, do 750 or $1 million, like, does that make a difference or not?
Yeah.
Enough to like
Yeah,
plan out?
that's a good point.
If you mean not breaking it up?
No, he's still on. If they say we can't give you 1.5 million, we say, well, what
Oh,
about
oh,
a million? What
okay.
about
Yeah,
750?
yeah.
So maybe we get a few different ideas and we have to look into borrowing authority as well. So I think we go 750, 1 million, 1.5, see what their response is, see how much the rate would be, see what the borrowing authority is, see how long we borrow it for. And yeah, okay.
I'm bringing up this next topic
Yes.
because we're now headed to December, where we got to start wrapping up the budget. So depending on how much we borrow is going to depend on how much that budget goes up. And do we want to consider presenting it in different chunks so the entire budget doesn't get voted down? So I need
That's a
time,
really
if we're
good
going to go that route, I need time to design that, is what I'm saying.
Well, I think you've got a good point about getting parts of it to pass, but
I would not have said this a month or two ago, probably, but based on circumstances now, I think maybe we should. And I think we need some perhaps legal guidance. So if these departments are voted up, but this is voted down and our previous budget was consolidated, how do we move through? Ostensibly, what we do is we then revise that one department and put it out there again. But what if it doesn't pass again before the fiscal year starts? Where does that leave us as a default budget for that orphan department?
that.
Yeah.
June?
I believe that if you set it up and have them vote by department, you are opening a can of worms. I think that you present the budget like we've always presented. You give ample opportunity for people to come in or come on Zoom and ask questions about the proposed budget before the vote. And then if by chance it fails, you can try the other option. I just feel like voting by department is going to convolute the whole process.
Well, Jim?
Yeah, and I just want to echo the concern, which is that the implication is that the budgets that are approved are the ones that therefore pass, and you're constraining your ability to respond to the voters' rejection to a very small portion of the budget, which may be unrealistic to implement. So although I like, we were trying to recapture some of the energy of town meeting at the ballot box, but I think in fact, if I were on the select board, I would want to maintain my maximum flexibility to make changes to the budget wherever it's available in response to an overall budget rejection and not be constrained department by department.
Thank you, Jim.
So do nothing now.
Hmm.
Yeah, keep it just as we have it.
Well, I think there might still be some discussion about it, I would
Okay.
imagine.
I will just say there were at least two factions, maybe 3 or 4 factions at the meeting on Saturday. Some people who spoke in favor of this and some people who are not in favor of this. I'm not really sure what the right answer is. The one thing, and this ship has sailed, the advantage of town meeting, of course, for a select board member is you leave the meeting with a budget that's passed.
Yeah.
However amended in real time, and not trying to guess, oh, well, so what would the voters accept in terms of our increase? Why did they vote it down?
Well, that's where I think if we can try to have something in January after we think we're done with the budget.
Yeah.
To say, everybody come give us your opinions. Then we at least get a little bit of a telegraph of that, but.
So
You're
we're still
right.
chunking the charitable contributions, so much for this one, so much for this one, so much for this one, right? So it's the municipal budget and then the charitable
Yes.
contributions and the reserve fund.
And the
Conservation Commission.
Yeah. So that.
And Linda
would be
said we had to have that all done by,
End of January.
I thought she said it was the second week in order to get the ballots done, which means we got a lot to do between now and then.
Yeah, I think it's typically, what aren't petitions due like the
End of
20th
January.
or something, 20th, 22nd usually.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, I mean, we have to be well on our way by mid-January.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've changed the budget, like, I think one year we changed it the day before, it was like 20th. We had a meeting that night and we
Yeah.
gave Linda the number in the morning and we got it done. It's a hustle turnaround, but
So the consensus is to
Doable.
get the municipal budget as one big overall budget,
Okay.
not breaking it up.
It's probably safer. I mean, it's not guaranteed, but it's safer.
I don't have a horse in the race, I guess.
Yeah, I just don't know what
Makes
that looks
sense.
like if the whole thing tanks.
well, but I think if the whole thing tanks, then you can at least, like the Bard's just most recent point, you can make tweaks of the whole budget. Like if everything passes except for police, and then we revote police and it still fails. What do we what do we do then?
Right.
Back into a
Too much
corner.
money left over, no.
Yeah. So,
Now, some towns do it completely different. Some towns do all their capitals as one block of the budget. Some do all their employees, all departments together, all the salary stuff is part of the budget.
Hmm.
I like ours. I'm just saying I don't know if that even helps.
well, I think we still have some time to kind of noodle on exactly how
Yeah.
we want to do it. There are some pros and cons.
Pardon?
You know, I've just swirled around this and haven't really landed on something. But I'm coming back to, especially if we can come up with a moderated tax increase. I think a moderated tax increase and a consolidated budget is more plausible for passing.
Yeah.
For what that's worth. So I think our work on how do we flatten it out, it will influence at least my thinking on how we approach the voters.
I agree.
All right.
Okay, have we reached the point of diminishing returns? Want to move on to the last item or what?
I thought we just did. I know. You're way ahead. It's down to 6 minutes ago, Jack.
We had item E.
Your future.
We just did item E.
Okay, I didn't think, okay, then about item E, were we gonna say anything in front port forum about what happened? Because right now, we've not even announced the result of the vote.
I haven't, no, I haven't.
I thought that was one of the things we were gonna talk about, I mean.
Just a
Yeah.
recap of.
Usually Linda would write up sort of results. I haven't even had a minute to look back at it.
I'm still kind of frustrated that, well, I mean, it was very active turnout, lots of people spoke.
That was
But
surprised.
At the end of the day, it was what, 62 to 57?
That was pretty close.
I mean, a majority of 5 voters has just changed our town meeting to in about the most major possible way we could have.
Welcome to democracy.
Yeah, welcome to democracy, but,
Maybe it should have been an Australian ballot to ask the question.
well, no, see, that's gonna be the thing. I guarantee you at some point in the next 24 months, someone's gonna want to put
This thing the other way.
on Australian ballot, where at least at that point, everybody gets to weigh in, but.
Yeah, and at that point, because we didn't vote to put all public questions on Australian ballot, you might have to hold a
Oh,
special.
sweet Jesus, don't say that.
Well, yeah. I think we have to
You're
call-
right, but I wish.
But there's a third option or a second option. Call a special town meeting to vote to put that question on Australian ballot.
There you go.
So yesterday we could have voted, do we want to ask by Australian ballot to move town meeting to Australian ballot? Or the budget to Australian ballot? It's a two-step process.
It's not too late
I
to change our name.
brought it up 6 months
country.
ago, and I think everybody's head exploded, and we said, no, let's just do one vote, so we did one vote. Hard, looks like,
So
yeah.
it does seem to me that we have addressed, or that group on Saturday addressed the voting on these budgetary items. So I think we need to put that out to all the voters.
Yeah.
When I talk to a few folks, they immediately ask, oh, when can we vote on that again? I'm like, well, of course, you can always vote on something again. And so I think we at least need to start putting up something that said, what were the results and what does it mean for this town meeting? The other approach for this town meeting is, since we've resolved the financial budget issues, it would appear to me a reason to still have town meeting is
Your
any
reports of
other
departments
articles and reports of departments, any other business. It is, of course, possible we could say, even at town meeting itself, do you want to vote on putting every article that ever comes forward to Australian ballot?
The following year.
And I would suggest we not have yet another vote between now and March.
No, I don't think.
That if we want to do that, we do it at town meeting in March, it seems to me.
Well, couldn't you put it on the ballot, but it would not, like, say they voted to put it, we put it on the ballot
This year.
and in March, people vote, they want to go back. It doesn't impact until the
Right.
next March. What we voted on just now impacts
This year.
this year.
June?
Thank you. I think, I agree with what Bart said. I think if you put it on the ballot, the perception is they don't like the answer they got, the vote that came out, so now they're gonna ask it again. And so I would not put it on the ballot. I think that what Jay said, having a 5-vote difference at the town meeting between having it as, on the ballot, on the Australian ballot, or at town meeting, tells you why it's important to put it on Australian ballot. Only 5 people decided. But that's why this town meeting happened, is because people they don't have a voice because they're not showing up at town meeting, and they should have a voice. And so I'm a proponent of Australian ballot, just saying.
Thank you, June.
Well, COVID also taught us that Australian ballot definitely. The world did not end because the budget was voted by Australian ballot.
We did it 2 years in a row.
That's been a concern around here. The world ends just for random reasons, and
I think code for the world ends, the world as we know it ends, i.e. it changes, which is what it keeps doing.
On an increasingly rapid basis.
Yeah. Anything else?
well, the fire department was good enough to show up. Did you guys want to say anything?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
Library, you wanna do library?
Library.
Waiting for election day.
Yeah, library, you guys got anything?
We just had a trustee meeting and then came here to this meeting to review the budget.
But you'll be here next week to drink beer, right?
There's beer next week?
This week.
At Stone
Oh,
Corral?
Stone Corral. Yeah, I sent you,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Not here or there.
I was like, wow, these select board meetings, first there's pie, there's beer.
It's happening.
Oh, this is great.
Minutes will go up.
Okay, yeah.
So we're
Stone
gonna
Corral.
do the 25th.
Well, yeah, I think if you like, hey, Josh, it's Thursday, I got a bunch of information, we can add it to the Monday agenda. If I know,
This week?
that's, I know.
I'm
Like,
still trying to get caught up from the last 2
even,
weeks.
I know, my next 3 days are already jammed. Most likely, we'd be looking at something on the 25th,
Yeah,
which would be a pre-Thanksgiving. quick
Pre-Thanksgiving
meeting
party
to
and-
See what our options are.
and then reality the following Monday.
And it would really be warned, the agenda would be specific to this broader issue about the revenue for the budget as a whole.
Yep.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Lisa, I.
Part I.
David, I. It's the only vote we took tonight.